Yes, well, we have now roughly 2 hours or so, and I thought I'd say first a few more words about dialogue. We could discuss it a little and then go on to something further. Now, one point, I don't know if I... Yes. You see, we were discussing the size of the group, you see. We can have dialogue with one person, or with 2, 3, 4, even with you, within yourself. You may have the attitude of a dialogue, right? And as you weigh all the opinions without deciding, you know. You can have that attitude by yourself, too. But in a group, a large group, certain new things come up. I've mentioned some of them, but the power goes up much faster than the number of people. You see, it could be compared, I think we've said it before, to a laser. You see that in light you have everything going in all sorts of directions, the waves, and in a laser they all move together coherently. Now, generally in a group of people you have all sorts of movements going in all directions, counteracting each other. But if we have this dialogue situation in a group which has sustained dialogue for quite a while, and people get to know each other and so on, then we might have this sort of coherent movement of thought, right? A coherent movement of communication. It would be coherent not only at the level we recognize, but at the tacit level. That would be more important. You see, the level which we have only a vague feeling for, but it's important to have that vague sense of the tacit, even if you can't do any more than that. See, the proprioception is not something that you're highly cognizant of ever. If you're moving your hand, you're not very thinking, conscious of it. I'm proprioceptively moving my hand, you see. But nevertheless, it's there, right? Now, that's the same sort of thing we have in mind here. Now, we have to sort of study it for a while and work with it to get into that area, which we haven't been in here. But when it works, it should be somewhat similar, saying that it may look very subtle and insubstantial, but it makes a fundamental change. Because everything ultimately follows from the subtle, and the explicit is, the thought is a map which the subtle is sort of being guided by, right? Now, yes, so that is one point, and I wanted to say now that there are three. You could say there are three dimensions of the human being which we could consider. One would be the individual, just by himself. Clearly the individual, the body is separate in a certain way from others, although not totally, because, say, it merges with the air and the light and the food and so on. There's no place where it really ends. It's just relative, right? You can't say if an oxygen molecule comes in, then it suddenly becomes part of alive, and when it leaves as carbon dioxide, it's dead, right? You see, you must say that there's no end, really, no sharp end to the body, and perhaps you can't say where life begins or ends, right? Now, but there's sort of a focus of it at a certain place, right? Now, the individual, each one has peculiar features, physical, due to heredity and certain DNA and all that. And also he has a certain mental features, experiences, background, capacities, and so on. Now, in addition, he's got the self-image by which he tries to identify himself, and we'll come to that later, right? Now, then we have the collective dimension of the human being, where you have a considerable number of people, a society and a culture, right? That has a qualitatively new feature. It has great power, as I've said, potential here even actually. And in dialogue we discuss how to bring that to some sort of coherence and order, right? And then I say there's a third dimension, the cosmic dimension, right? That's human beings have always had that in mind. You see from the most prehistoric times, I think that was perhaps first nature. Nature is sensed as something beyond the individual or the society, and they may have felt that there was, in the early days, there was animism. Everything was animate. It had a spirit, right? And we were therefore participating in all that. And since then it has changed, as we know, now to the idea we're all separate and so on. But and these ideas then help to create the very situation that they represent, right? Now, later, as people moved away from nature into cities and farms and so on, even a farm is quite far from wild nature, then they began to feel the need for the cosmic, and they may have introduced various ways. You see, in the even very early times, there was art, which probably had a sort of a cosmic connection, and religion, right? The notion of religion and philosophy, attempting to make a connection that way, and that has persisted. But religion has, meanwhile, people have, large numbers of people no longer believe in the assumptions of religions, and has left them nature. They've got very far away from. Philosophy has become confused, and science attempts to do this to some extent, to connect you to the cosmos, but it's limited. And most people can't understand it all that well, and therefore that connection seems to be rather lost right nowadays. So I think we want to come back into that, you see. That's an essential dimension of the human being, right? Along with the individual and the collective. And perhaps even the individual may have some contact with the cosmic, or the collective could have it, right? Now people accept that idea. For example, in religions, they go to church and expect collectively to come in contact with God in some way. And and perhaps in dialogue, when we have this very high energy of coherence, it might bring us even beyond just being a group that could solve social problems, right? That it could make a change in the individual and a change in the relation to the cosmic. We know this has been called communion, right? That is going from, it's a kind of participation. The early Christians had a Greek word, koinonia, something that, which really, the root of the word is word to participate. The idea of partaking in the whole, taking part in it, right? Not really the whole group, but the whole, right? That sort of thing is, I think, significant. That we should keep in mind that the dialogue, and in fact all we've been talking about, is not only directed at solving the ills of society. We've got, unfortunately, to solve these ills. It would be much better if we didn't have them. But if we want to survive, or even if we do survive, we want to have a worthwhile life, we've got to deal with those problems. But ultimately, that's not the whole story. That's all I'm saying. I mean, that's only the beginning. Yes. Before I go ahead, then, could we open the thing to discussion? Either on this or on the dialogue or whatever we've been doing, right? And let's have, if we might, a few minutes of discussion just to make sure that people are going along with it.
I felt there might be a disconnection very early in this, particularly our Western society, once medicine got hold of birthing, because obviously, if you've ever seen it, the infant is totally stressed out in a hospital birth, or was, particularly until recently. And it seemed to me that brought the adrenals, stimulated them overmuch, and broke the connections.
Well, there is that notion of breaking the connection, the bonding, they call it, of the child to the mother, and also eventually to the society. Or we could say our whole connection to the cosmos, the bond has been broken too, right? And you see, there's been a book come out, it's based on, there was an article in Nature about the end of nature by, was it McKibben, right? And that you're saying that originally we thought of nature as vast and ultimately beyond anything humans could do anything about. Now we can see we are in the point of being able to destroy it, you see. Of course, there's a still greater nature in the cosmos which we can't get at, fortunately. So, and the idea, that's a similar notion that early tribes, they even said we've got to, nature, the earth is the mother, you've got to take care of the mother, right? Now they said, no, that's stopped, you see. So you've got to just exploit the earth, you see, and we see the end. Now, this ending of the bond, in a way, it's like human being has got to the point. See, people used to say, well, I know things are pretty bad here, but out there is nature, it's still okay. Right? That was the content of the article. Now that's gone. Now that makes a very big psychological change once people realize it. They say we no longer have nature. It's like somebody saying, well, you can't count on your mother anymore, You're on your own, right? That's the sort of thing we're in, you see, and it's not merely a question, see, whether nature survives depends on us, you see, and but that's not the only question, you see. The question is, there's some new orientation implied there, that we're really responsible for all this planet, right? And the question is then, what is the ground of that? You see, what are we, right? Is that clear what the question is?
I mean, what are we in relationship to this responsibility?
Yes, but how can we ever be? What's our people? What is our nature? What is our being that would allow us to be responsible? See, we never thought of ourselves as that sort of beings, right?
We always thought nature would take care of us, and now we've moved
Yeah.
from that kind of infancy to a kind of transitional.
Yeah.
Either we become caretakers or we become.
Something, we've got to be responsible for nature, but then from what inner resources can we draw to be that responsible, you see, or from what resource? If you see, what would be the ground of that possibility? See, how will we change from being people who feel that it's like somebody who's growing up and saying, mother will take care of him, father will, whoever it is, right? Then say, well, now it's changed, it's the other way around.
Are you asking how a person would become responsible?
Yeah. Or on what basis? What kind of change is involved to do that, right?
Well, wasn't there a time when what was being articulated was that man had dominion over nature?
Yeah, but people...
Separated himself from it as rather than being part of it?
That's one current of thought was that, but the other one remained underneath, that nature is still there, you see.
Right.
In other words, they still felt it's so vast that we don't have to worry, right? You see, that came out in a television program I saw about cutting down the Brazilian rainforest, and well, there was a peasant cutting it down with a chainsaw, and he said, they explained that this was destroying everything. He said, yes, it makes me very sad. I know I made a desert, and we made deserts in another state, and here we're doing it again, but I've got to support my family, right? Now then they went to the landowner who said, the Amazon is vast, we'll never, nothing has been done to it at all, right? Nature is still there.
Yeah, I guess my point is that when you say that you have dominion over something, it separates you from it.
That's right, but people didn't believe that they had total dominion over nature, you see. They still felt nature was there beyond them to support them. Do you see what I'm trying to say? It was a kind of...
Oh, I see.
In some sense, isn't this nature here operating?
Well, it is in a way, if it's nature, but we talk about nature as existing on its own. That's the idea that has developed, right? That nature developed by itself, right? And it could take care of itself for hundreds of millions of years. And then we came along, very small beings who made a small impact on nature. And we say we depended on nature. Then we increased our power more and more, right? We began to make cities and farms and separate ourselves a bit, but it was always in the back of the mind. Nature is vast, and a lot of people took a lot of comfort in that, right? Saying, at least if we made a mess here, still there's pure, undefiled nature, right? Now, but then there was a program from northern Sweden of the Laplanders who, when Chernobyl exploded, it ruined, it all came down there, most of it, and they couldn't use their reindeer anymore, you see. That was a terrible catastrophe for them, and it was very wild land. You know, they used to say this is wild, undefiled land, but now it's been defiled, right? So there is a psychological question there which is worth thinking about, right? That we are really responsible for nature. Now, we can't think of a wild, vast areas which take care of themselves, right?
It almost seems to have one too many things in it, though.
Why?
Us responsible for nature.
And nature for us. I mean, I'm trying to say we're responsible to participate intelligently in this whole thing, right?
So,
But previously we said we're not. That was the whole reason why we could say we could exploit, right?
Yeah, it seemed to be an issue of freedom, what we consider freedom, what we're free to do.
Yeah, well, we could think we could just keep on using it, you see, and it would take care of itself, right?
Sort of like stealing from a rich man, you figure I can take what I
Yeah.
need out of his orchard.
He won't notice it, right?
Now the fact is that there isn't that much, and that the stealing has become so you're asking what is the change of mind or state of mind?
Well, that we're going to be co-participants.
Is that the ground you were referring to a few minutes ago?
Well, there's a ground beyond that, I think, you see. But nature is part of our ground. And if nature goes, you see, we are lost a lot of our ground, you see. So some people think we can survive by organizing nature, you see, by finding species of trees that can live despite the pollution and genetic engineering producing all that stuff. And, you know, we'll organize it all so that we will live in a highly industrialized world where nature itself is industrialized, right? You would say, we'll call it the nature industry, you see. Like we have the entertainment industry, we could have the education industry, we practically have a culture industry, so we could now have the nature industry, right? And we say that, so it was said we could simultaneously conserve nature and make in a profitable way, right? Now maybe that technology could open that up. We can't, no, it looks a little dubious, but it might. But then where would it leave us, right? I mean, what kind of a life would that be?
Well, that doesn't sound like participatory.
No, I'm saying that that's what they're thinking of. It's participatory, but not one that looks good, right?
It's participatory separate from nature. It's
Yeah.
not including. It's not participatory thought with nature or participatory whatever with nature.
You know, that's the way our whole literal thought goes. It tries not to be participatory. It is, but in a rather incoherent way, right?
Okay.
There are some people who are talking like this Gaia hypothesis of the Earth as a being, and if you can support certain parts of it, they say the coastline, for instance, is a very crucial part, or maybe some particular mountain regions, or some that you can use some intelligence as a human being, not for profit, but for the health of the organism, which is this.
Yeah.
Supports us.
We could, see, in a way we've got to begin to do that, to say we have got to begin to organize our activities so that not only we don't destroy, but that we keep it going right, you see. Now, you see, we are playing a bigger and bigger part in this whole thing, and we have to take that into account, you see. Now, but nature has a certain almost religious significance in our psyche, which will, and this is going, we have to consider that when we take this new attitude, it has a very great implication for the human being, right? But I didn't want to stop there, you see. I wanted to go on to something else, but part of this cosmic dimension is man's attitude to nature, right? But now there's something beyond all that, not merely the cosmos as we see it, through the telescope or looking out at the sky at night, but I want to suggest there's something beyond limit, right? Beyond, you see, something not finite. You see, the word finite means limited, finish, finite, definite, define, set a limit, right? And the thought always works by setting limits, right? To define things, what they are, and then discusses what they mean, and so on. See, thought works through limits, and also we're saying thought is limited because it's an abstraction. It can't get it all. In fact, it probably can't get more than a little bit. The concrete goes immensely beyond what thought can get. That concrete process, even materially. But science is tending to move in the direction of saying it can get everything, you see. See, like they said, well, once science did very little, then they made a theory of atoms, and they said, well, that gets, they thought that would get everything. During the 19th century, there's Lord Kelvin who said physics is pretty well finished and young people shouldn't go into it because it's only a matter of the next decimal point, and so on and so on. And he said there are two small clouds on the horizon, the Michelson-Morley experiment, black body radiation. Those who know physics will realize that they were the clouds that led to relativity and quantum theory, these big revolutions now. So he pointed to the clouds correctly, but the point is now that nowadays it's all been overturned, and they have entire from the 19th century, but people are now saying we're going to get a theory of everything, and they don't have it, but they say we're going to get it. And sort of writing a post-dated check, you see. And and then nothing will be needed but to just compute everything. Like we won't need physicists anymore. You just need computers. Right? Now, there seems to be something in the structure of thought in civilization to claim that you've got everything. You say you're going to get everything. We want to know everything, right? We feel better that way. The body feels better. We feel more secure. We think we're going to be able to solve every problem and so on. You see, so there's some tendency in thought to say we could get everything and control everything, right? And that would mean everything would be known by thought, right, and by knowledge. Accumulated knowledge and thought, and skill, and whatever we do, our technology and so on. Now, that's one view, which the latest expression of that is the notion of artificial intelligence, that people will make machines, computers, far more subtle than the present day ones, which will do anything that human beings might do it, perhaps even better. And of course, this is very far from realized. We all know that. Everybody agrees. But there's, again, the faith that this is going to happen, right? See, which this faith reflects desire, doesn't it? It reflects an impulse, right? There's an impulse to want this, right? You see, now, other people might say that such a world, it does not appeal to me, right? But for some people, it looks very appealing, right? This fellow Minsky, who's an artificial intelligence man, says, well, this carbon-based intelligence is not very, it's a mess, you see. He calls it a meat machine, right? He says, let's have a silicon-based machine, which will be nice and orderly, and we will all produce this, and that'll be much more intelligent. It won't get into these messy emotional problems. You see, so I'm suggesting that there's a strong current in our culture moving in that direction, right? Now, on the other hand, you could criticize that and say, when will science ever know the whole thing? You see, why should they believe it? You see, they're very far from it at present, and people have thought they had it in the past and they didn't. You see, why not? Why do you think it won't happen again? You see, and also. You don't really know, and is it right? This is the right strategy to say you know. You see, even if the fundamental ideas don't change for a century, that doesn't mean they won't change in the next century. You see, there's no intrinsic reason why we should assume that we know everything, and there's a good reason not to, because we don't know, and because if we assume that, we'll close our minds. Right? It will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's not a good strategy to assume that you're on the point of knowing everything. And and in addition, you could criticize it in other ways. You see, saying, is it in the nature of thought to know that sort of thing? You see, if thought is abstraction. Say, if the real reality of thought, its concrete reality or actuality, is this tacit process that we don't know anyway. And the one thing we surely don't know is what thought is doing, you see. And that seems to be very crucial, because whatever we do, it produces unintended results, right? You see, in this very moment, as we are going, we may make an analysis of the whole past, but this moment is contributing, participating to our relationship, right? So that analysis cannot cover the moment of analysis, right? The assumption is that it's not going to matter, and scientists, in a certain area it doesn't, you see, but when it comes to the vast, broad area like this, it does. You see that there's no way by which thought can get hold of the whole. Not only is it too much, it only abstracts, but also the past it only gets a certain amount from the past. The present is not contained in thought. Now, that may not look important for industrial purposes. It is actually, but it doesn't look that way. But for the sake of human relationships, what is happening in the present is all important, right? That this unknown effect of thought may be just the thing which is either it saves us or destroys us. So, therefore, it seems that this assumption that thought is going to capture everything is really, there's no good reason for it. It's bad strategy, and you could question it very seriously. It doesn't seem to be in the nature of thought to be able to do that at all, right? Now, so suppose we say it can't capture everything. See, whatever thought can capture is within limits, right? It defines limits. Clear. Now then, we may say, okay, we can always go beyond those limits. In the 19th century, science had certain limits. In the 20th century, it's gone beyond, but it's still limited. In the 21st, it may do something else, assuming we get there. To the 22nd, it'll do something else again, right? Now, but it'll still be limited, right? And what is beyond those limits may be extremely significant, right? It's not a question of slowly approaching the limit, getting nearer and nearer. The new things, when you get beyond the limits, you get new things totally unexpected, like relativity and quantum mechanics were not approached by classical physics. We're totally different, right? You had no hint of them in classical physics. Right? So maybe the next physics will have new features where we have no hint about them today, right? So, therefore, there's no so we could look at it and say the concrete reality or actuality, whatever you want to call it, is not limited. That's the suggestion. Thought cannot capture it. It is not cannot be put in boundaries. It is not limited. It is neither limited by being known already, nor is it the sort of thing that could be known in limits, right? But it's the sort of thing we talk about when we talk about this tacit process of the mind working, paying attention, and so on. You see, perhaps paying attention has no limits either. When we are stuck with certain thoughts, we pay attention in certain ways, you see, to what the thoughts say is important. But when you release those thoughts, your attention can go in new ways. The attention comes from that tacit movement. It doesn't come from the thought, right? So I'm suggesting that basically the unlimited is subtle. You see, as we move toward the subtle, we get beyond limits, because the word subtle means undefinable fundamentally. It does mean the unlimited, right? It is relatively subtle the way we talk now. It gets more and more difficult to define, and in a sense, eventually it gets beyond what you could define, you see. So we'll call that the unlimited is not just in the direction of going to greater and greater distances out to the end of the universe, but it's also going, even more important, into more and more subtlety, right? And I'm saying now that I'm going to suggest the unlimited is the ground of existence. You see that what is the unlimited. That is the suggestion we could explore, right?
Could we say that all the activity of thought is always to reduce human beings to a quantity? And use as
Well, not necessarily even quantity. It can have quality. You see, quality is also a limit, right? You see, if something is green and not red, see, a limit is not maybe just being bounded, saying this table is clearly limited by the boundary.
Well, let's just say limit. We won't discuss whether it's quantity or quality.
Yeah, it's also limited because it's wood and not iron, right?
But the real thing that needs to be encountered is this unquantifiable aspect of being alive.
Or even not even qualifiable, probably.
Well, undefinable.
But it's undefinable. You see, it's subtle, right?
But all of this action of thought, whether it's in philosophy or religion or science, is always to reduce, to quantify, and we keep trying to get to this undefinable through all these definitions.
Yeah, by assumption that they will capture it, right?
That's what's destroying them.
Yeah. Now, you see, science doesn't have to do that, or philosophy don't have to do that. You see, that's an assumption that that's the way it should go, right?
The way it is going.
Well, it's going, but it's based on an assumption that that's the way it ought to go, right? A commonly accepted assumption.
That through the definition we can find the undefinable.
Well, we can eliminate the undefinable, reduce everything to the definable, right?
Yeah, all right, well, that's death.
Well, other people think it's wonderful. You see, like somebody was saying, you know, if you did that, you would reduce us just to a machine with artificial intelligence. So somebody says, what's wrong with being a machine? It's a wonderful machine. A very, you know, intricate machine, right?
Well, but that thing we mentioned before that is into, what was the word we were using so many times? You know, we had this big word we were using.
In-
What?
Ineffable.
No, not incomprehensible.
Incoherent.
Incoherent. The coherence that's alive in us
Yeah.
is not going to be satisfied with being a machine. So it's incoherent to want to do all these kind of things.
Yes, you may feel that way. Then we would have to have a dialogue with somebody who feels the other way. You see, I'm trying to say it is really urgent, although I don't know how to do it, that, see, if we develop one group of people who says being a machine is terrible and another group says it would be wonderful to replace us with silicon-based machines, what are we going to do, right? You can't, see, if we will split the human race up into all these parts.
But I'm already one of those kind of people.
What?
The people that believe in all these damn theories about being alive.
What about
Otherwise I
it?
wouldn't be here listening to
Yeah, but I'm trying to say that still there are other people who believe otherwise, and we must consider them because they're, even if you don't care about them at all, the very fact that they think that way is affecting us. See, their thought is our thought. See, we discussed that before, right?
We need a new thought.
Yeah, well, you see, to oppose their thought is not going to be the answer.
No, a new thought wouldn't be an opposition thought.
No.
It would be a new.
We've got somehow to have a dialogue. Even if they won't participate, we can participate in a dialogue between our thought and their thought, right?
Right.
Yeah, but there's another factor in here. If my total experience of living that I acknowledge is in my thinking, inevitably, I can only look at what I can hold in thinking. So at some point, unless something breaks, it doesn't matter which side I'm on,
Mm-hmm.
if all I've ever known is thinking, acknowledged, then no matter how I try, I can't see
But that
anything
couldn't
else.
possibly be your total existence.
Huh?
Just to think couldn't possibly be your total existence.
No, I'm saying the only experience of living that I acknowledge,
Acknowledge.
that's right. See, my thinking is my reality.
The Hopi prophecy represents the figures of Western man with a gap between the head and the body. Cut off.
Well, look, I'm just saying, let's look at this. The idea is, without jumping to any conclusions, it's important to sort of take all this in, like we were discussing the dialogue in the morning, saying all these are opinions, right? We have our opinions, which we favor, we have arguments for them, and they have theirs, and we don't think much of them. But it's important to still hold them, right? Even if they're not participating in the dialogue, you're still in dialogue with their opinions, right? Now, perhaps we have to get beyond, as we're saying, these particular opinions anyway, but what I wanted to suggest is, at least for exploration, you know, I'm not saying we're going to have an answer to this now, but it's important to appreciate this background, because whether this thing can be solved culturally and socially depends on that dialogue, right? If some of us come to the truth, so-called, well, a lot of people are left out. It's not going to solve it, right? We're going to have another conflict. So just as you had conflict between different parts of the Christian faith, all believed in love and so on. Right? You see,
Are you saying that if I'm in dialogue with another person and I am willing to hold his view, his
Yeah.
opinion, and he isn't willing to hold mine,
you can still dialogue inside yourself.
yeah,
Or those of us who do it that way can dialogue together. Right?
and that will make a difference, you're suggesting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so...
We're not strengthening a group, a selection of thought, which is opposing some other thought which is dominant. We're taking
Yeah.
them all in.
We're at least considering them all, and we may not have an answer. We may and see. Often in a dialogue group, you could go week after week, and people are never convinced. They still keep talking, right? So you still keep the dialogue up in yourself and among us.
What happens to the conflict, though, if the other person won't dialogue or the other group won't dialogue, then what happens to the conflict?
Well, we can at least dialogue within ourselves as far as we can. Now, it may be open up later. You see, I'm trying to say that if we really could do something creative, then it might affect the other person still, right?
Yeah, on a tacit level.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If we keep on repeating the same old story, then it won't, right?
In the dialogue with ourself or with our group, we might come up with something creative that would.
Well, it would really communicate at the tacit level, beyond, both with words and beyond words, right?
I might relax a great deal if I met somebody who could actually hold my view in their heart, and yet I was aware that they also had another view. And so that might open something up in me, whereas if I'm clear that you've got your view set and it's different from mine, then I'm not going to move it.
But that's not like tolerance, is it?
No, tolerance means you agree to let the other person think whatever he likes, but you're not very interested, right?
You're putting up with it.
Yeah.
Well, it could be like, there's people I've met that have been very certain about things, and they're very hard to talk to, and then one day something real happens to them. Somebody dies or something very serious happens to them, and all of a sudden they're standing there sort of naked and vibrating and being real in that they're admitting that they have feelings and possibilities and stuff. And if you've been clear with them all the way through, then that clarity is the reason they're standing in front of you instead of someone else. So in this dialoguing, if there's groups of people that have a kind of clarity that they're holding, when the so-called reality of the situation impinges upon people who are not seeing it, who are they going to target? I mean, that's kind of, you've already established a relationship.
Yes, and we need this business of being able to hold all these views, not only there, but also in politics, in various ways. You see that, because you get a feeling for the whole structure of thought, the impulse, which, not merely the intellectual content, but the impulse which makes it attractive, right? You understand? You see, because really you can't, the intellectual content alone will never change them, right? No matter how ingenious you may get, right? It won't change you either, you see, that no matter how ingenious they get. So, so therefore, it's a matter, we have to appreciate the whole human being, right? What it all means, right? Now, somebody who's opposed to you politically or ecologically or whatever, or scientifically, it's hard to appreciate. Remember what I said about Einstein and Bohr, that they had the greatest of goodwill and very intelligent, and intention was to do it, but they couldn't do it, right? Now, see, so this calls for something new. See, people haven't been commonly looking at it that we're asking for that. Some new creative movement in the human psyche, right?
We said that opinions and the content of views are important to some degree, but what we are truly looking for in a dialogue is a shift in perception, something far more drastic and far more deep than any view which one may hold.
Yes, it's a shift in perception and fundamental assumptions about the nature of perception and thought. Right?
Just as a suggestion, if such paradigm shift could occur in a person, to consider nature and himself, everything as whole, everything as him, to the core and depth of his being, that would be a perception change, I would suggest.
Yes. Yeah, we have to see that, but I think we have to go through some sort of process which is of the nature of dialogue, which you described this morning, of going through all that chaos and, and opinions and vacillation and difficulties, you see that we have to face that structure which opposes this, we see, within us. You see, the other person's structure is us, you see. The minute it's the same as the other person's food germ as you, right? You see, once you let the food germ has come in, then if you have a good environment, it just grows, right? Now, you see, if we don't, the immune system stops it growing, but if your immune system doesn't recognize it, it just grows, right? You see, so all this stuff comes in, and it's growing in us, even as we think we're resisting it. And it affects us in its basic principles. You see, or else we're at least affected by the principle that that's his view and this is mine, which is false, right? That it is just thought, right? Thought, wherever thought is, that's just thought, right? It's all one. Now, you see, it's almost like saying, that these primitive people were saying, it's all one seal, right? This is even more so. You see, here's where it really works. It's all one thought. Manifesting in all sorts of places, right? Now, so the spirit of a dialogue is important in facing this question. But now, suppose we put it aside for a while, you see, and say, okay, we realize that we are going in a direction which a very large part of the culture doesn't agree with at all, right? Now, the next point is, let's come back to this notion of the unlimited, right? I mean, people have had this from the very beginning, as I said. Primitive people looking at nature must have felt it's vast. They had awe of it. They could look at the sky and say, we don't understand this, that we depend on it. And so on. Then we brought it, we now have brought it within our power, but there's always more, even physically. But there's the vast universe. But people claim now that they know it, you see, from the beginning to the end, perhaps. But perhaps there's really surprises there too. But but then I say there's the unlimited, which is much more subtle than that, right? The fact that the ground of the thing cannot be gotten hold of, right?
How do we get to that, though? Because I think that's a very important thing if we talk about perception shift. It seemed to me that one approach is an inference. We plainly say that subtle gets more and more subtle, and in some ways, like in mathematics, if you add 1 plus half plus 1/3 and so on, one has an intuitive feel as a projection, it will sum up to 2. Now, but that's an inference. Is that all what we suggest here, that we are projecting unlimited, undefinable as a nice, rational projection?
Well, that's the first step. We're making a kind of map to try to, because there are maps already. You see, the map, I've told you that there are a lot of maps which say everything is limited, right? So I'm suggesting another one to consider too, right? You can, if you like, have a dialogue of these maps, but I'm saying that you can provide a good case for saying there is the unlimited, right? The unlimited is that which is. And then what is the limited then? You see, the point is, suppose if you said that the unlimited is one thing and the limited is another, then the unlimited would be limited because it would be a boundary and something else beyond it, right? So therefore you have to say the unlimited includes the limited. Therefore the limited is really the unlimited. But it is abstracted as the limit. The limited is really the unlimited, but it is abstracted as limited, right?
Well, how do you say it includes? Don't we say by including limitation, the unlimited also becomes limited?
Yes, but it has limited itself. You see, that is the nature of creativity. Right?
Then what is when it's limited? It is
What?
that we say that what actually is limited.
But also unlimited. You see, the point is we have to say there's a certain paradox in the language when we attempt to discuss anything unlimited or absolute, right? Like, you see, if you say the absolute has got to be unlimited, you see, if the absolute is independent of everything, if it depended on something, it's not absolute. Now, so then you say, what is the absolute? You see, Then there's the relative, which means it's dependent, right? Now, then how can we distinguish the absolute and the relative? You see, some people have said everything is relative, right? So that the relativity is absolute. You see, it was what they have saying. You see that they have brought the absolute in anyway, right? Now, therefore, you find it slips out. You see that you cannot readily make this distinction of the absolute and the relative without getting into a paradox when you carry it too far. No? Now, but what I suggest is that you can go a bit further and say the absolute includes the relative, right?
You could go other way, like the Indians do, and say that the limited is only an appearance of the absolute.
Yes, it's only an appearance, but it's still...
In that sense, it's not real, and therefore it does not have a relationship to the absolute.
Yes, but it must have one, because there's a difference between correct appearances and illusory appearances. You see, the whole world, we could say, is an appearance to us, right? It's the scientific view is it's manufactured in the brain, right? Produce a show of the world which guides us, right? Sometimes the show guides us nicely, sometimes it doesn't, right? So we can say there can be correct appearances and false appearances, right? Now, if the appearance is correct, and in some way it must be related to that which the appearance of, right? You see, so you cannot say that a correct appearance is just totally illusion, right? Illusion is an incorrect appearance. Therefore, appearance is a part of. We have to say this distinction of appearance and reality is one of those paradoxical things where thought breaks down. You see, that reality includes within it the process of creating appearances, right? So appearances are part of reality. And they can be correct or incorrect, right? Or relatively correct, or all sorts of possibilities.
Well, we can go on the other way too and say that appearances, whether they are correct or incorrect in terms of the appearances, carry a incorrectness. And again, I don't wish to go into absolute, but I rather say that it carries the incorrectness that we ascribe to reality to them.
Yes, well, if we directly say the appearances are the reality, we're saying something wrong. That means our language is rather crude and unsubtle, right? That's what we mean by literal thought, you see, which says I'm telling you the way things really are. You see, but there's more subtle thought, there's metaphorical thought, which doesn't claim that. See, poetry doesn't claim that at all, right? Like, see, if Shakespeare says all the world's a stage, he isn't trying to say here in front of us is a stage, right? Now, it's more subtle, you see. So the point is, reality is very subtle, and I'm saying ordinary thought has not kept up with that.
Now, do we imply anything by having this relatively mixed distinction between absolute, relative, appearance, and what is? Are these terminologies, imply something beyond them?
Well, yeah, they are a kind of map which may point beyond them, you see. That's what I'm trying to say. They have I'm suggesting they have a significance, but they're acting like a sign, right? Rather than directly being a copy of reality, right? See, the sign does not look like the reality that it points to. Right? It's not a copy.
But it has to go in some ways to...
It has to point properly.
To point properly. It has to go in some certain way. It cannot go just out.
No, there's something about it which is proper, but it doesn't mean that in any sense it's a copy of it, right? You see, so our thought is, in this way, is functioning as a sign, a pointer, a significance, right? And we say the reality is undefinable, right? If we want to say it. Now, and we say appearance comes out of that reality produces appearances. It's a real process. Appearance doesn't just suddenly appear out of nothing, right? If the brain isn't working right, the thing appears in a very different way. Or else if you think differently, it may appear differently. Or if you don't look correctly, it appears differently. You see, a lot of things you've got to do to get a correct appearance. So, therefore, appearance is not to be derided just because it's only appearance, right? You see, rather we say that But now there's been in thought the idea of the appearance and the essence being as the true being, right? The appearance is what appears. Huh? Now, but when you go deeper, you say even our thought is only an appearance. It's an appearance of something more abstract, right? So we have two appearances. One of them is called the appearance, and the other is called the essence. I don't know if you see what I mean. The two together give us a better pointer than one alone, right? Well, see, suppose we say this appears to be solid matter, right? Scientists have said in true being it's made of little atoms moving around very fast, right? And that way, they say that's really what it is. It's really an illusion that this is a table. But then they said, well, let's go on further. They said, in fact, the atoms are not solid matter at all either. They're made of smaller particles. There are no atoms there at all. They're appearances too, right? And those neutrons and protons are made of quarks, and who knows what they're made of, right? And therefore, we don't seem to get beyond the level of appearances. These appearances are, but nobody has seen them with the eye. You see them with the mind, right? But the combination of the various kinds of appearances points to the reality in some way better than just one alone, right? You see, that's the suggestion, you see. So we have...
Appearance become essence, so is there a dividing line?
Well, it's just a division like north and south, you see. North becomes south when you move along, right?
So that when the scientist is perceiving this level and then breaking it down to atoms and then to electrons, that the total picture is the essence?
Well, we don't get the essence. I'm trying to say
You don't get it.
the true being is undefinable. Now, I'm saying that is, I'm not saying, I say if we talk that way, I think it's coherent. Now, whether this will be more than a map will depend on something more that we have to do, right?
But we have to continue going around this issue. As someone said here, tiptoe around it. May I ask, what do you mean by reality and maybe a different word, actuality? Both may be used here.
Yes, well, these words are rather difficult to define, you see.
Well, again, we go around.
Yes, you see, the word reality is based on a Latin root, res, meaning a thing. At that rate, reality would be everything. But that is based on a word, rare, meaning to think. You see, that the thing is what you can think about, right? And what is determined by conditions that you can think about, right? And the thing is different from the thought, but nevertheless they correspond in some way. That's the ordinary way of thinking, right? And now we're saying that that way of thinking is limited, right? And reality might mean the true being, or if we don't like the word, we'll just say use the word the true being. And then actuality means the actual act. The appearance is really the form in which we experience actuality, right? It's in consciousness that we sense the most actual experience there is, right?
You differentiate between true being and actuality as something actuating, moving?
Yes, actuality means the act, you see, but we can get into very difficult philosophical questions this way. I'm not sure it's going to help us, right?
What is it we're trying to...
I think I'm trying to say, I think we can get it clear if we stop here and say we have the notion of appearance and essence, but the essence turns out to be a more subtle appearance. And so finally, whatever we can actually get hold of are appearances, right? And but what is implied is some true being beyond which I say is unlimited, cannot be defined, subtle.
Would the same thing be said about this passive movement of thinking? That
Yeah.
is also, in essence, unknowable.
Yeah. I think if we go too far into all this, we'll get into some scholastic type of discussions, which might be difficult. You see, it could be interesting, but there's limited time and so on.
What I was proving, how far we can go implying. What is the power of implication?
Well, we're using that now, and I'm trying to say, what I want to say is that we're implying the unlimited by this argument, you see. And
But doesn't the fact that you can drink a glass of water imply the limited? Because you can only do that by drinking a glass of water. You cannot think. You can't think it.
yes, but the fact that it's water is thought tells you that. You see, if you had no words, you see, like we went into Helen Keller once where she couldn't tell that running water was the same as standing water until she had the word water, you see.
No, but see, our difficulty, as far as I can see, is that we live as if our thinking were unlimited.
Yes, I agree. That's
Okay.
well,
Now, that's proven constantly by the fact that I eat rather than think my meal.
yes. That the scientists would argue against that by saying, that's all. It's all arrangements of atoms moving around. You see, but doing all that. You see, but let's accept it and say that thought is limited. Thought is an abstraction. You wouldn't be able to find your food without thought, the abstraction of thought, and so on. You see, we abstract and the concrete work together, right? That the abstract is itself the result of a concrete process, which affects the concrete process, just as the appearance is produced by the underlying true being, right? See, now we're saying that is a way of talking which is coherent. Now, I'm saying it's important at this level to have a coherent way of talking because this is the very foundation of it. And if you are incoherent at this level, it's going to spread, you see, into everything. See, so people have tried to do this in terms of the idea of God, you see, getting it all by saying God did it, right? And God made it all, right? And He arranged it all to be coherent and so on. You see, that God is the source of everything, God is the true being. See, all sorts of arguments have been made, and people have gone through that throughout history, right?
Now, see, I didn't really follow all that you were saying, so that I got a hold of it,
Yeah.
okay? However, I don't think what you're saying, when you say how important it is so that we're coherent, we have to have followed each word so that we got it
No.
verbally, but you're trying to loosen up something.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying, so that we don't take that as reality?
Yeah.
Basically, we will see that what's being perceived and thought about is not I think is that word now.
Well, it isn't the whole of the concrete reality,
Yeah,
you see.
okay.
That it does point to it. It does. It has a relation somehow.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But you're trying to loosen up this process for us.
Yeah. All right. So I'm saying the underlying true being, whatever you want to call it, is undefinable, and it defines itself. That is, I have used this idea that it unfolds. You see, that it unfolds into the things that appear, right?
But we can't get a hold of that.
No, so we say the true being is that whole process then. Now, then that's a way of looking at it too, you see. Now, okay, so now the question which will arise is, can we do more than that? You see, we have cleared up the map to some extent. Is there a possibility of actually consciousness somehow contacting the true being in a more intimate way than that, right? And I think everybody knows what the question means, right? And that's, people have gone into that in many, many different ways over the ages, right? So we'd like to talk about it for a while, you see.
I see two ways here. One is what we seem to be exploring. This is coming to project and consider the unlimited by implication. The second thing is, and then we derive to various notions, suggestions, proposals to think about it, to feel it out, and so on. The other one is the experience of the mystic. He's directly there. He doesn't tiptoe around. He says, reality is, and then comes and says various things, which of course becomes a set of interpretations and so on and so on. Now, these are the two ways, and I wish to see, are there any other ways?
Well, that's the point. Is there something between? You see, we might say here's one, here's the other, but that's like saying all the oppositions that are saying, there's the scientist and there's the artist and so on. You see, is there something in between is the question, you see. Let's explore that, I'm suggesting.
Well, you talked about the scientist on one side and the religious person on the other side, and in your experience, you might be able to say that they're both working together. I mean, I can't see that any scientist who's looking deeply into these questions of physics isn't getting very deeply involved in some philosophical statement. We've lost the material, science has sort of lost its material base, hasn't it?
Yeah. Well, the only reason I brought that in was to say we have all sorts of oppositions.
But everything is leading to this question.
Yeah. This is the question, I think, on which ultimately the whole thing turns. You see that, because if you ask, even if we manage to get the human race to survive, we say, what for, right?
The question is, what relationship can we already have, the unlimited is, we can say, and out of the unlimited, everything else is.
That is a suggestion that we should organize our way of using language to talk that way, and that is more coherent. Now, but that doesn't mean that we are talking from the unlimited, right?
Just a statement.
Yeah.
And out of this limited has come thought, which is
No, the thought has come from the unlimited. I'm trying to say thought is part of the...
Everything is out of the unlimited.
Yeah, but thought too. You see, we mustn't divide them, right?
Finish one. Then there is the limited. We agree with that statement?
Yeah, well,
It arises
there is and there isn't. In one sense, it's an appearance. In the other sense, it's a correct appearance. It has more being than a mere appearance. But it isn't the ground, right?
Well, it's the same thing if you want to talk that way. It's just
Yeah.
It's a way of the unlimited being.
The unlimited has a kind of being.
All right, okay. And out of this being...
And the limit, I meant the limited has a kind of being, right?
All right. Which arises out of the unlimited.
Yeah.
Or is an aspect, anyway you want to say. And out of this limited comes thought.
No, it comes from the unlimited. Thought is the process of limitation itself.
Outside of thought, is there any limited?
Yeah, there's no limited.
So you're saying that the material is not what you mean by the limit.
No, I think the matter is unlimited.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm using limited as a material word.
I say, but we, by thought, attribute limits to it, right? Which may be good maps, may be good appearances, right?
But no matter how you say it, thought is not that big of a thing.
Yeah, it's not, but it's there, but it's not that big, right?
All right. But the problem with thought is it thinks it's the unlimited.
Yes, that's the problem, you see that. And in fact, you see, it's always moving in that way. It says, I'm very modest, I only tell you the way things are, I avoid fantasy and speculation.
But
And
in
so.
actuality, it's a very small thing.
Yeah, but it always ends up by saying it's everything, you see.
If we at least had this perspective, we might not be so easily fooled. Because the thought is taken over as God, as reality,
Yes.
and everything.
Yeah, it took over. You see that but the same problem arises religiously. You see, you could say God made everything. God is unlimited, and He made all the limited things, so He determined the limits, right?
That's the thought.
It's a thought, but it's very similar in form to the thought I'm suggesting about the unfoldment of the limited from the unlimited. I'm trying to say the same problem arises again in different ages in a different form, right?
Well, I'm trying to get to that place where I'm not fooling myself.
Well, I hope
You'll never get there.
you either have to be there.
Well, I mean, that's the process of this whole thing. I hope would be to somehow de-delude me, or disillusion
Well, you see, we can't do that. You see, I think that we can only say, let's be serious. If we're very serious, then maybe we won't fool ourselves, right?
All right.
You see, we're exploring.
Yeah, by understanding that whole the whole thought process just now, if we tried to get a hold of it, we wouldn't delude ourselves. That would be just further delusion, wouldn't it? Because it'd still be in thought.
Yeah, you see,
Are we postulating that there's no way out of this?
No.
No way out of it in thought.
Or not even that, because it's a bit too strong. We're saying no way out of it by thought alone.
Okay, yeah. Phew.
Religion particularly has hypothesized the existence of some primal force, some essence, which, for sake of a better word, maybe we call it the ultimate reality, the all, the everything. It also hypothesizes that this is somehow or another knowable, at least to some degree, by human beings. And finally, that it is not knowable through an intellectual process or through empirical thought. That it's knowable only somehow intuitively. And I don't know whether this is what you're alluding to.
Well, there may be some similarities, because we're saying if we're going to contact it in any way, it would have to be through the subtle tacit process, which we wouldn't ordinarily be able to define, right?
And I guess that would be the intuitive.
Some people call it the intuitive. You see, we have it the matter of what do words mean, right? Right.
Yeah.
Now, some people mean by the intuitive something else, right? So I say the question has arisen perennially in different forms, right? So we can consider it now in this form, you see. So now say the unlimited is that which is, you see. Now perhaps I don't know if we should make a break or all right, but I'll just discuss the question of truth, and then we must get to the question of the self, which gets in the way of this whole thing. You see, we're not going to make sense of this because we have left out the principal barriers. But let's say something about the truth. You see, now we talked about the true being and so on. You see, the word true in English means straight, honest, and faithful. That's clearly part of truth, that you don't fool yourself. Don't twist it up. And in Latin, the word veras means that which is, or its root. So that's another good meaning. It's faithful to that which is, right? And in Greek, it's aletheia, which means not being lethargic, not being asleep, being awake and alert. And apparently, somebody looked up the word Indo-European root, which is deru, having the same root as tree, and druid. It meant steadfast, you see. And the druid was somehow, it suggests that early peoples must have somehow tied trees up with truth, I don't know, but and perhaps when we lose all our trees, we will lose our truth, you see. So the point is, there are many different ways of looking at it, but if we look at all that and then say, you see, we can't really grasp. See, the question is, we don't grasp that which is, but we are that which is, or at least we're in it, right? We're part of it. We participate. And truth, insofar as it goes through us, is a part of that which is coherent. You see, there are two theories of truth that are commonly thought about. One is the correspondence theory of truth, saying that a thought is true if it corresponds to reality. And we discussed that before, saying that that is a very abstract idea of limited value. The other view is the coherence theory, that it's coherent with that which is, but then usually that's too narrow the way they think of it. I mean, we mean coherent all through the whole of life, right? You see, so the truth is coherent, coheres with that which is. It is that which is. It is. The truth is not just something about that which is, but the truth is, right? You see, now this is an important point to realize. The truth participates, right? But the false also participates, right? And so, see, that's what we've been going on all the time. That literal thought claims to be just telling you that which is, the way it is, and not participating. And that has been the basically false feature of literal thought, right?
There is no objectivity.
Yeah, ultimately we can't have this. There's a relative objectivity which we need, but on the really important questions we can't get it, right? Now, therefore, and we're saying the truth must obviously participate in the unlimited. It cannot be limited, that's clear. Truth itself cannot be limited, right? Otherwise, what would it mean, huh? So, truth, but we have to get meanings coherent if we're going to perceive truth, right? Or take part in truth, right? Therefore, that's why I say the dialogue is so important. If our meanings are incoherent, how are we going to participate in truth, right?
Well, I think you mean realize it, right?
What?
Because we're already participating in truth.
But we've got to do it in a certain way, which, I mean that, and when we begin, we say the whole group has different assumptions and people don't meet, right? The meanings are incoherent, so we cannot arrive at truth, right?
No, I'm saying that simply by the fact that we're alive here in this room, we are already participating in truth.
Yes, but in another way we're not, you see. That
there's no realization of it.
Yeah, but that's the important point. So if we want to realize truth and take part in it, then we have got to get our meanings together, coherent, you see. And then truth may emerge unannounced, you see. It sort of comes in subtly, but you see, the attempt to arrive at the truth directly is too violent, right? Too arbitrary. And and that's one of the worst ways of creating disagreement. You see, like I told you, Einstein and Bohr each had two different ideas of truth. And once you think you've got truth and somebody else thinks he's got another truth, you could never meet. Right? So you've got to get their meanings clear, you see. And the same holds in religions.
When you say get the meanings clear, you're talking not on the verbal level.
No, but more deep, with the whole thing, yeah. You see, so therefore what we're doing is exploring, in this whole seminar, we're exploring meanings, you see, and perhaps truth will will arise, or whatever it does.
Moving toward coherence
Yeah,
is already a pointer toward truth.
yeah, but it also creates a mind which is the proper vehicle of truth, right? You see, a mind that is incoherent cannot hold truth, right?
Well, I would distinguish.
It cannot take part in it, right?
We may have to watch that the point toward coherence is something final.
No, but our
Then
mind
we
would...
arrive to truth. But I'm saying maybe moving toward
Yeah.
coherence already a vector pointing toward truth as
Yeah.
we go along.
Yes, and the move toward coherence is primarily the move to acknowledge and see that the self-deception, to see that the mind is conditioned to move away from coherence, right? You see, through the whole social background or whatever reason, they may go beyond that.
So how is truth different from the unlimited?
Well, you see, there's no real difference, but it's a different way of...
It's a coherence with.
Yeah, yes. You see, that is what people talk of the truth is the whole truth, you see, and so on, you see. Now, the...
Concept.
Hmm?
A dangerous concept.
Why?
Truth.
Well, it can't be a concept, that's the point. You see, it's got... truth is that which is, not a concept.
Yeah.
It's that movement which is the subtle, the tacit. The truth is not any particular thing that is conceptualized and
So
abstracted.
seekers of truth per se are necessarily operating incoherently.
Yes, if they seek it as a thing, you see. So I think that's essentially the thing. Then we have to say that to get into this area of the unlimited and whatever would be meant by truth and so on, we find that the principal source of incoherence is actually the thought about the self, right? About yourself or what you identify with, your country, your religion, and all that, your self-interest, right? That we've been going through it all the time, and everybody knew it before. That is always preventing it, right?
To say the truth and nothing but the truth, the whole truth.
Yeah.
That's the truth already is incoherent.
Well, you won't really get it. You see, really, I think you'll have to say truth is whole, but you don't get the whole truth, right? Now, other people have said God is truth, you see, but in a way, if you say truth is that which is, and that you can understand why somebody would say it, right?
But isn't truth of the now, and just in the moment?
Yes, it may be. You see, we're coming to that next hour. I think that takes some further discussion, you see. But I think now that we've reached a point where I see we could just look at it, pause a moment and say, if there are any questions, maybe one or two, and then we pause, have the break.
Are truth and facts the same thing?
No, see, a fact is much more limited. You see, the word fact is based on a Latin root meaning what has been made, you see, or done, like fact, manufacture. And see, we can establish a fact in various ways, right? But we would have to say, is it really a fact? Is that the truth? We see, people can establish facts which are misleading, right? You see, so is it a true fact, right?
We have to be very careful when we use the word truth, because we can impose limitations on that. Okay? Just like people use the word God.
Yeah, well, we're in the same problem with people using the word God, but you're right. But we have to be therefore very aware of it, right? You see, the word God is perhaps the way people confronted it before, and it got mixed up with all sorts of other things. And the word truth can very easily, people in the interest of truth, you see, like, will then not be able to agree.
And that's why it's so important to be able to hold in a dialogue all of the opinions,
Yeah.
all of it, because it goes to something more subtle.
Yeah, there's something more subtle. Truth is being. It is that which is. It is not any particular content.
Or
The true being, if you want to put it that way. See, truth is the essence, if you want to put it. These are all rather metaphorical ways of talking. We mustn't take them too literally, right?
so it means actually, as a human being, not opposing anybody's opinion, no matter.
Well, that's too strong again. You see, you may not agree with somebody's opinion. You see, that's perfectly all right. We may, for a long time, not be able to get this agreement on opinions if we can all listen to the opinions, right?
Okay.
So even Adolf Hitler, say, we won't agree with him, you see. But it would be important for us to be able to put ourselves in his place, as it were, to see his thought and see how inevitably it would give rise to his impulses. Perhaps we lack the information needed to do this, I don't know, but one piece of information is that he was beaten mercilessly by his father and ran away once, and that the whole society was constantly beating children all the time. And another piece of information was that there was some possibility that one of his ancestors was Jewish in a society where that was regarded as very bad, and he wanted to be sure that he dissociated himself from that. You see, there are various items of information which could help us there, but some of which we obviously don't have now. But you see, it's important to understand that, though we don't necessarily agree with any of it.
And that would come to dialogue?
Well, that would be our dialogue among ourselves, or even with your own, by yourself, right? The attitude of dialogue. Right? Now, the further this attitude could spread, the more I think that it helps to bring order.
It almost seems like it's not such a bad thing to hold opinions, provided we're ready to have them beaten a little bit, because to not hold opinions is also a kind of a falseness.
Yeah, you can have opinions, all right. You see, provided it's a little bit open, and provided you're a bit open to the other opinion, right? Even if you don't agree.
I mean, but just to have no, to be totally neutral about cutting down the Brazilian rainforest.
No, you have.
That's the point, right?
Yeah, but you can understand why some of the Brazilian landowners believe that there's no problem. You see.
Just being able to hear that and be with it.
I think we'd better start the break. And I wonder if we could really be really end it in 15 minutes, because the time is short, right? Intermission.